Okay, this lesson is about finding the tax on dividends. So just like capital gains tax, just like capital gains are taxed because they're a form of income, dividends are also taxed because they're a form of income. They're just going to be slightly less. Okay? Dividend tax is complex because dividends came from profits the company made. So it was also a form of income for that company. Why is that complicated? Because companies get taxed as well. In Australia, companies are taxed straight 30%. Do you remember what the highest tax rate there was for people in your capital gains tax? 45. So companies get taxed less than that, and companies can be making billions of dollars, okay? So we kind of get a raw deal if we earn heaps of money and we're just a person, versus a company only gets taxed a straight 30%, no matter how big they are or how well they're doing. Now, they're going to be taxed 30%, but depending on the company, they might choose to do one of three things. They might pay the full 30% tax on the profit that they're sharing as dividends, and that makes the dividends fully franked. So you might remember back to lesson 1 when we looked at the yield column of your shares. And when you looked at yield, it had these little letters, F, P, or no letter. We didn't talk any further about that. I just said P means partial, F means franked. I didn't actually teach you what that meant. Today, you're learning what that means. So F means that the company paid the full 30% tax on the profit that they shared the dividends with. They could choose to pay 30% tax on part of the profit that goes to the dividends. That means the dividend's partially franked. That's what the P stood for. Or the company could be a dog and pay none of the 30% tax on the profit, meaning who would have to pay the tax? The company or you? You. The company made a profit. They didn't pay any tax on it, but they shared that profit with you. So who's going to pay the tax? You are, okay? That's why it's a dog move for the company to do the last one, and that would be the no letter. So these three things correspond to the F, P, and no letter that we saw in the yield column of share listings right in the first lesson. I put this in blue because this is background that you might need to talk about in your DO. You're not going to be asked about all this detail in the actual test, okay? You just need to be able to do the maths of it later. So I will give you some writing time for this so that you've got something to talk about in your dividend tax section of the assignment. But just be aware, you just need to be able to do the maths for your test here. I'll give you some time. I'll move on because I want to do the maths side of things. You can always get the video and pause it later. Now, luckily for us, Australia, this started in the 1980s when John Howard was the Prime Minister. Australia has something called a dividend imputation system. What's that about? Where any tax that a company has paid on the dividends, they acknowledge that, and you as a shareholder only need to pay extra tax if your tax rate is more than 30%. Okay? So we've established that a company pays 30% tax. So if they've already paid 30% tax on the dividend they're sharing with you, and your tax rate is exactly 30%, you don't owe anything extra. If your tax rate is more than 30%, well, you just need to pay a little more to make up the difference. The point of this is so that there's no double tax, okay? The acknowledgement comes in the form of something called an imputation credit when you're paid your dividends. This credit represents how much the company paid in tax on the dividends you're receiving. Now, we used to be like America, but we're not like that anymore. What happens in America is they have no such system. So what happens? A company makes a profit, they pay the government 30% tax on that profit. Then they share the dividend with us, with the shareholders. And then you have to pay tax as well. So how many times was tax paid? Twice in America. Whereas here in Australia, what we do is, if the company was nice and they paid tax on it, when they send you your dividends, they give a little piece of paper that says, oh, we already paid this much tax. So that when you're at tax time, you don't have to pay any extra. You only have to pay what you're owing, okay? So no double taxation in Australia. Clearly, because of all of this detail, the dividend tax situation is a bit complicated, but trust me, all it takes is using the following formulae in order as they flow into each other. Can I just, before I give you time to write these up, can you see how they flow into each other? The income declared comes from given information. The second formula, does the second formula use stuff from the first formula? The second formula here, what does it use from the first? Income declared. So you're not going to be able to find this unless you've used the first one. So you go 1 and then 2. And then once you've done the second one, see how the third one uses tax liability? And then the last one uses the tax owing. So how does it flow into each other? Well, income declared is used in the second formula. Tax liability is used in the third formula. And tax owing is used in the fourth formula. You must use them in order, okay? I'll give you a longer bit of writing time. So 10 past, I'll get back to you to get these 4 down so I can run an example with you. Kids playing a racing game and there's teachers trying to explain. While people are practicing, I'll check your notes. Sorry. It's a double lesson and we're not interrupted by house meeting. Yes. Yes. 2 for 9, so the ratio. And then that's it. So the ratio will be 2 for 9, so well, we need to work out how many shares she's going to get. So she's going to get 2 for every 9 that she has. So she's got 13.95. Divide that by 9, you'll get a number. But instead of before, the answer already being straight, we're going to times it by 2. Because you get 2 for every 9 that you get. 1 more minute and then I'll do an example. This is, if you're using a spreadsheet, these are what your columns would be. So you would have a little column that finds the income declared. You would have a little column that finds the tax liability. You have a little column that finds tax owing. And then the after-tax return. 20 seconds and I'll do an example. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's do this example here. If you get paid dividends, you'll get information like this, probably sent in the mail in the olden days. You'll probably get emailed this these days. So your questions will be along these lines. Given the following dividend advice, find the after-tax return on these dividends if the shareholder had a rate of 15%, and then we're also going to do the same thing if they had a rate of 45%. Notice that there's no unfranked amount. Some of your exercises in the DI will have both of those. Don't get fooled, just use my formula, okay? Just use what the formula says and you'll be right. So, find the after-tax return on these dividends if the shareholder had a marginal tax rate of 15%. Can I use these formula out of order? I must use them one after the other. So, first step, income declared, inc declared. Is there an unfranked amount? No. Is there a franked amount? So I go 379.5 plus. Is there an imputation credit? So the company, whichever company this is, paid tax on the dividends for me. So 379.5 plus 162.64, 542.14. So I just did this one here, tax liability. Did I just find the income declared? So that number goes here, 542.14, times by the marginal tax rate as a decimal. What's the marginal tax rate in example A? 15%. What is that as a decimal?
0.15.
Good, 0.15. 542 times 0.15 is $81.32. Rounded to 2 decimal points. So that's tax liability. So I'm working my way down the formulae. I'm up to the third one. Tax owing. What do I owe in tax? Is equal to the tax liability, which was $81.32. Take away the imputation credit. So what is this working out? This tax owing is working out how much tax should I owe the government if I have a 15% tax rate, okay? But then I'm also taking away the imputation credit, which is the tax that the company already paid. Is imputation credit bigger than this? So what's my answer going to be, positive or negative?
Positive.
No, take your time. I'm getting a smaller number and I'm taking a larger number from it. What's the negative? So it's going to be 162.64. It's going to be negative $81.32. What is having a negative dollar amount? What's the connotation there? You're owed money. What this is saying here is the government owes you $81.32. Why? Can someone explain to me why you need to be paid $81.32? I thought tax was the government was taking money off of you. Why?
Because the companies paid 30%, but
Yes.
you only need to pay 15%. So
Yes.
Yeah.
We said on the last slide that companies in Australia pay a 30% tax. If you're not earning very much and your tax rate 15%, well, the company paid 30%. That's not fair. So you get back that 15% difference back. That's why this is negative. So that negative has ramifications for the after-tax return. After-tax return is the unfranked amount plus the franked amount, which was the $379.50. I'm not adding any unfranked amount here. Take away the tax owing, but it's taking away a negative number. What do I do in maths when I have a take and a take? What does that sign become?
Plus.
Becomes a plus. So that becomes 379.5 plus $81.32. Move the calculator over. 379.5 plus $81.32. So what I'm actually going to get after tax on these dividends, I was supposed to get $379.50 from my dividends. The company already paid this much tax. My tax rate is only 15%. So actually, I get a little more back than I'm supposed to, okay? Can you get that example down, please? And then I'll do the example with 45%. right time. If you're thinking, can you already predict what's going to happen in example B?
They're going to end up paying more tax.
They're going to pay more tax. So their after-tax return is going to be what? Larger than this or smaller than this? Smaller, because the company only paid 30%, but I owe 45%. So I need to pay them a little money, okay? Get that example, please. Start thinking about how you're going to type that into your spreadsheet as well. I advise that it's a separate column per formula. I'll have my laptop out as well if you want to look at my spreadsheet layout. I don't mind you looking at it, I just won't show you the formula. Unless you quickly switch it over while I'm across the room. Sneaky, sneaky. Right, let's do this example for 45%. Is everything going to be the same except the... what's the only different part going to be for the...
0.15.
Yeah, that's going to be 0.45. So half of this is worked out, but from the second formula it's going to be slightly different. Inc. declared. I'm not going to rewrite the whole working out. It was $542.14. Tax liability equals 542.14, but this time it's times by 45% is a decimal, so 0.45. Oop. $542.14 times by 0.45, 243.96. Tax owing. So it's going to be 243.96, but this time it's minus 162.64. It's going to be a positive number this time. 243.96 minus 162.64. Positive $81.32. ATR, after tax return, is going to be $379.50. But now it's just minus. It's not minus minus. So minus $81.32. 379.5 minus 0.32. 298.18. Some right time there. And I believe right now, so just for now, does anyone have the timeline? Is that 70.5?
Yeah.
Just work on 70.5 for now. 70.6 will be like a 5-minute recording. I'll get back to you at like 10 o'clock. For now, 70.5. I'll stop the recording now, and I will check that there's freaking